All right, y'all. Hi. I wasn't there at the intro meeting, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Amanda Nima. I am an incoming college sophomore studying at UC Berkeley. I studied genetics. I did debate in high school, policy debate, all 3 years of high school, went national, tournament of champions, the whole 9 yards. And I'm here to teach you today about policy debate, what you can expect at a policy debate, and why it might be a good choice for you. There was supposed to be another lecture today. Lily Ma was supposed to be here. She will tune in at some point. Like you probably heard me saying, she's coming back from her job right now and she has to sanitize. So she's a little busy at the moment, but she will be here soon. It doesn't matter because I'm presenting the first half of the lecture anyway. At any point, if y'all have questions, since I can't see all of you while I'm screen sharing, go ahead and send them in the chat. I should be able to see that during the video. So that should be good. But yeah, feel free to send me your questions. Stop me at any point if we have any confusion. Do we have a chat going? Yes, we do. Oh, 34 things in the chat. Okay, very nice. Okay. So does anybody know anything basic about policy debate? Feel free to unmute yourself, throw it out there, write it in the chat. Just let me know so I can read the room what we already have an understanding of, if anything. I'll give you guys a minute or two.
Well, you get like
Yeah.
one topic a year and it's a plan debate. So, and you have to like prep both sides and
Yeah.
like create a plan or a counter plan. And it gets really weird because people get bored debating the same plan for an entire year. So you start using wacky stuff.
Yeah, to some degree that's true. I'd argue that it might not be so much boredom, though that is a part of it, so much as it is creativity over time. We have such a long span of time to come up with fun things that people start getting really inventive. Policy debate is also the oldest debate event, which means it's been around long enough that new techniques have been developed over time. So we have a lot of interesting stuff in this event that you just won't get access to in the other ones. Does anybody else have something to throw out there? Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, what do you mean by portable skills?
Oh, we'll get into it, don't worry. But I'll just summarize right now. Portable skills are skills that you learn in one environment and can apply to another. So in this case, oh, I think we just got more people. Oh, no, we didn't. Okay, sorry, my screen's readjusting. In this case, when we say portable skills, we mean that you learn skills doing policy debate that you can then export to the rest of your life. I'll talk about some of those later, but I mean, public speaking is a great example, but you also learn about government policy and you learn about a lot of the different nuances that you'll need in life when you're addressing power structures and structures that you might be critiquing later or that you might be involved in later. Okay, so getting into what policy debate really is. Like I said, this is the oldest debate event. It's the original competitive debate event. Policy debate started actually in the 1800s. It's changed a lot since that point, but every other debate event you may have already learned about this week or in previous years or whatever, has actually found its start in policy debate. So Parley began as a way to train novices for policy debate, as did public forum. I'm not saying those are not both perfectly valid events now. They've changed a lot. Lincoln Douglas was a way for people to engage without a partner. So these things all actually originated within this policy debate sphere. Like somebody said earlier, I'm sorry, I don't even have your names up on the screen. Oh, we have a new person. Hello. If you're just tuning in, my name is Amanda, and I hope you learn a lot. One topic for the whole year for policy debate. I'll give you all that topic in a couple of minutes, but we have really in-depth debates on this one topic. Now, it's important to note that this one topic is not going to be hyper-specific. Usually we have one big area of government policy. So in past years, I debated on immigration reform as a whole, I debated on education reform as a whole, and I debated on our policy interactions with China as a whole. So those are some examples, and there are infinite things you can do with those, which makes policy very interesting because you get to pick maybe something that you're really interested in and apply it to the topic. So I was very interested in the LGBTQ rights movement. So when I was debating on education, I talked about pro-LGBTQ curriculum in schools, right? So you can kind of apply your passion. To summarize this year's topic, it's criminal justice reform, but we'll get way more in depth on what that means later. Like others have also mentioned, you do get to debate with a partner in policy, which is a huge plus. And policy debates are actually the longest debates on the circuit. They last around an hour and a half. It seems daunting at first, but I promise it goes by really fast. I think I've done 200 of these in my life. maybe more, which means I've spent about a solid week of my life in these rounds. One team proposes a plan that fits under the year's resolution. We call this a plan text. The other team negates this plan. We call them the negative. Oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go forward. How do I go back? Shoot. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm still learning this situation. Yeah, so the affirmative team proposes a plan that fits under the resolution. So for this year's criminal justice reform, somebody might propose a plan like defund ICE, right? Or abolish ICE if you can argue that that's criminal justice. And the other team would have to give reasons why it won't work or it's not a good idea. Your side is randomly selected by the tournament and switches every round. But there are ways to argue without being unethical. So if you agree with abolish ICE, but you don't, right, but you're not arguing for it, you have to argue against it, you can say, no, abolish it in a better way, for example. You have a judge in the back of the room that carefully watches the debate and decides based on your arguments who wins. So policy debate is also unique in the sense that unlike parliamentary debate and public forum debate, you don't have to speak in a certain way, you don't have to present yourself in a certain way. Advanced policy debaters don't even wear formal outfits like the rest of speech and debate. We're kind of our own community. We hold ourselves to a different standard, which means that in policy debate, it's much less easy for judges to make arbitrary decisions since they have to justify them to you, to your face, at the end of the debate, and you can even argue with them sometimes. So all in all, I would argue that policy debate is a very unique event. I'm going to give you some reasons here why that means you should consider doing policy debate. So if you haven't already heard a little bit, oh, sounds like Lily will be here soon. Policy debate has the most potential for college recruitment and scholarships of any debate event. You can actually be scouted by debate teams, by college debate teams, if you're doing policy debate. The reason for this is because many colleges like Harvard, Dartmouth, Stanford have very competitive international teams or national teams. So for example, when I was debating in my senior year, CSU Long Beach scouted me and offered me a full ride just for debating. So these are things that you can work your way up to in policy that are invaluable to your college applications and help get you a leg up. I was also able to, I'm not trying to brag here, plenty of people are able to do this. I was able to secure interviews with Harvard and Dartmouth for this team, and I currently go to UC Berkeley, partially because of their competitive policy team. Yeah, like I said earlier, you get to debate with a partner. It's fun to have a companion year-round. My partner has become one of my best friends. You get a wonderful, close-knit community that stretches nationwide. I have friends all the way in Miami, Florida, Austin, Texas, that I've made in debate rounds by participating in policy debate. Most other debate events do not go national this way. So, for example, parliamentary debate is essentially a California-only event aside for a couple of national tournaments. So these are some examples of why you might want to do policy distinctively. There's more diverse argumentative style than most other debate events, mainly because it's a longer type of debate and it's been around for a longer amount of time, but you have a longer time to speak too. So in public forum, for example, your speeches might be around something like 4 minutes. It's difficult to come up with an extremely complex argument in that time. In policy debate, the reason it's so competitive in college and in high school nationally is because you can come up with incredibly elaborate ways of arguing, which will be clear to you later, but might seem a little overwhelming now. I already covered the 1 year long topic, but the other thing is since policy is the first debate event ever to happen, it prepares you for all other debate events basically automatically, because everything that's happening in those other debates has already happened in policy. So if you get your start in policy, you'll be able to do any event you want relatively easily afterwards. For those of you who are musicians, the metaphor I will use is learning the piano before you learn another instrument. There's so much technique when you learn the piano and there's so much music theory you can apply to many other instruments. So policy is like the piano of debate a little bit. Okay, so I talked a little bit about what the topic is for this whole entire year, but here it is in the flesh. You'll notice it's very wordy. The reason for this is because policy debate is very precise. So it's resolved. We call it a resolution, the topic. So resolved. The United States federal government should enact substantial criminal justice reform in the United States in one or more of the following: forensic science, policing, or sentencing. So if you have something that you care about that fits under this topic, and you can even bend the topic, you can argue different ways the topic applies, I argue that this is the best time to be able to debate it nationally. The reason we say resolved is because one team is going to be arguing for this statement, and the other team is going to be arguing against the statement or against what the first team says about this statement. Lily's here. Do you want to give a minute to introduce yourself? She's the other lecturer for today.
Yeah, sorry I'm late, y'all. My name's Lily. I just graduated DHS, and I've debated policy for all 3 years of like my high school experience. Amanda and her partner actually trained me, and we ended up working pretty closely. So I'm kind of excited for this.
Lily's a great lecturer. We were just getting to the resolution. And just so you all know, this resolution is also all over the internet, as is a lot of information about policy. So you can literally Google policy debate resolution, and there should be a website that comes up called NSDA, and you should be able to find information about this resolution on there. And just in case you want the exact wording of it again, but I also don't blame you for wanting to copy it down. Okay.
I have a question.
Do you have any other questions? Of course. I'm sorry, I just saw the chat.
Oh, yeah. Do you get to choose which side you argue on, or is it assigned?
That's a great question. It is assigned round by round. So you might have, depending on the tournaments you go to, beginner ones, you might have about 4 rounds. Later tournaments, you can have 6 and then work your way up to 8 or 9. Every round will generally switch off. So you will be assigned affirmative or you'll be assigned negative, but you will have something prepared for both. You will have thought of it beforehand. And when you get into what's called out rounds, or you get into elimination rounds, which is basically when you've won enough to be competitive in the tournament, you will flip a coin. And if you win the coin flip, you get to pick your side. So if there's one that you prefer, when you start winning rounds on both sides, you get to pick that side more often. But it is partially up to chance on both ends. That's a great question. Does that make sense?
I have a question.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
The question is that you said that some colleges are monitoring these debates. So what do you exactly mean? Can you just like define it more? Like what exactly do they do?
So when I'm saying that, yeah. So first of all, when you do your college applications, there are going to be places for you to write down your accomplishments within debate, or within, life. But you can write down the ones you do in debate. And colleges with debate teams will often actually have, or competitive debate teams, will often actually have coaches on that admissions panel who are scouting for people who have those accomplishments within policy debate, because policy is one of the only debate events that goes to college, parley sometimes. But the other thing is, when I was saying you might get scouted, I've had 1 or 2 college people actually come into my debate rounds and sit in the back as a spectator and watch my debating to see if it's up to snuff, and see if they like it. You also might be judged by admissions people, just completely by coincidence. Those people are in the debate community too. They sign up to be judges, and they might end up really liking your debating and offering you some information on how to join their school or offer you a scholarship. There's a lot of different things that can happen in policy. You just have to work hard for it. But a lot of the other debate events don't even have that potential because they haven't gone to the collegiate level yet, which is a shame. But it is an advantage to doing policy debate. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you for clarification.
No worries. Do I have any other questions before I move on from this slide? Okay, speak now or forever hold your peace. All right. All right, so to talk a little more about debate, the structure itself of policy debate, like I said earlier, 1 team is affirmative, 1 team is negative. I think we've already kind of got the gist of that. There are 8 speeches in policy debate in total. That's why it's so long. The different teams, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I keep doing that. The different teams trade off. So the affirmative does 1 speech, the negative does 1 speech. This is mainly how it goes back and forth, and you and your partner trade off, which means each person really only gives 2 speeches in every debate. So it's not as daunting as it seems. It's about 13 minutes of speaking time total. This stresses a lot of people out because they're like, wait, if I do public forum, I really only have to speak for 6 minutes. But the difference is, do you want to rush yourself and speak in 6 minutes, or do you want 13 minutes to actually explain yourself well so that you don't have as much to be stressed about? That's how I think about it. This gives you a lot of time to kind of fumble the ball and make mistakes and still be able to clean it up afterwards. Part of why policy is so long. Between each of the first 4 speeches, you have a period called cross-examination, where you get to directly ask your opponent questions or they get to ask you questions. You don't have to memorize all of this right now. If you're interested in doing policy, I'm just trying to give y'all an idea of what this looks like. But so you're not just speaking into a vacuum. You are allowed to communicate with your opponent during set amounts of time. The first 4 speeches are 8 minutes long. They're all called constructive. Again, you don't have to memorize any of this now. And the last speeches are 5 minutes long each, and those are called rebuttals. We call them constructives because you're building your argument, and we call them rebuttals because at the end you're refuting your opponent. It's a little more nuanced than that, but again, you don't have to memorize all this stuff now. It seems totally overwhelming. I completely remember, but just know that there's a lot of speaking on your own without your opponent interrupting you, and then there's a lot of being able to talk directly to your opponent. It's a balance of both things. Now we have a concept called prep time in policy. During the debate, you have 8 minutes total, which you can run at any point, stop at any point. So I can say, right now, I'm going to start running some of my 8 minutes that you can take to prepare for your speech, discuss with your partner, or do research if the tournament allows it. So I could be getting up to do a speech and I could say, wait, Judge, I would like to take some prep time. At which point I could run as much of it as I want. It's entirely up to me to be strategic, but I have 8 minutes total at most tournaments. Where I can say, I'm really not ready for the speech. Let me run some time so I can get my thoughts together. This is also pretty unique to policy debate. For example, Parley does not have this at all. There's no prep time in Parley from my understanding. Lincoln Douglas has it, and so does public forum. But public forum, for example, only has 2 minutes total to gather your thoughts throughout the entire debate. Policy debate gives you 8 minutes, and that's not included when you get to write during your opponent's speeches or when your partner's talking. So policy debate, while it seems very long, is partially that way because it's slow and contemplative, and it gives you a lot of time to get your thoughts together, which is better for people like me because I don't like thinking on the fly. I like being very prepared. If you find that you are oriented towards being very prepared for any circumstance, policy debate might be the right choice for you. You can also ask your opponent questions during this time. So if you feel overwhelmed or if you feel like there's something you don't understand or you didn't get it out in that cross-examination period, you can also get it out at this time, depending on the tournament. Speaking of cross-examination, going a little more depth into it, it's a 3-minute period of time where one team gets to ask the other team targeted questions. It's very strategically useful. If you like having arguments, this is the point in time for you. You get to ask informative questions when you're genuinely confused. Like if you're just like, I don't know what that word means. I've never heard that acronym. This is the time for you to get clarification. But you can also use it to set traps for your opponents to get them to say things they shouldn't have. So gotcha moments within debate. And you can use it to point out flaws in your opponent's logic in front of the judge and embarrass your opponent. Basically, this is the time for you to punk your opponent. So if you really enjoy that kind of thing, policy debate is also perfect for you because there's not a whole lot of other events that have a lot of time to do this. Public forum to some degree has this, but they also have grand crossfire where everybody just yells at each other. Parley kind of has this, but you have to do it in the middle of your opponent's speech, which is kind of weird. Lincoln Douglas is just like policy cut in half, so like that's cool. But yeah, so that's cross-examination. If anybody has any questions, there'll be a time to ask in a moment, which I think is right now. So if any of y'all have any questions up to this point, we will have more of these times to ask questions later, and this lecture is not over. Please go ahead and ask them or throw them in the chat. Okay. Lily, would you like to go?
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to go a little bit more in depth now. So you get like a general overview of what the idea of policy debate is. We've got a few more like specific things to talk about. The first thing is evidence. The name that we give it is cards because they used to actually be pasted on cards, like index cards. So they're called cards now.
Like chunks of articles.
Yeah. And they're generally made from long articles, books, or website articles, whatever you need to say in your round or is presented with evidence. And then each card has a summarizing tagline, which basically summarizes what is said in the card, and then your card presents all the evidence, warrants, etc. that happens within the article that you have cut. Can we get the next slide? Sorry.
Yes, sorry, go ahead. I was just answering the chat. Does that work?
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so the plan is the affirmative plan. It's the hypothetical action that they think is the best, and it is a way to follow the resolution. Essentially, they propose a way for us to do the resolution in a more specific way. Example is this year is about policing, criminal justice, and forensic science. They might choose a specific plan under policing, or they might choose to offer more funding to forensics. And this is created in the first constructive. This is something you have prepared beforehand. You do not need to create it on the fly in that round. This is the focus of the debate as well. So continuously through each speech, it'll be back to addressing what the affirmative has proposed in their first constructive. The neg tries to kind of poke holes into this and prove for why it's a bad idea, whereas the AF has to defend the plan throughout the whole debate. It cannot change. Okay, so stock issues are the affirmative burden. Essentially, the affirmative has to prove the entirety of these stock issues in order to win or to be an affirmative that is even like proposable or something that the judge can vote for. And the neg only has to disprove one of these: significance, harms, inherency, and topicality. Significance, as in the plan that's been proposed has some sort of significance to it, whether it be the impacts that it creates or the thing that it solves for is significant. Harms, which is what it's essentially the impact of either doing the affirmative or not doing the affirmative. Inherency has a really low bar. Essentially it's just it hasn't been done before or it isn't already done, i.e. we could not impose, like, create the idea of legal immigration under an immigration topic because it's already been done. This is a very low bar. You just have to do basic research on your plan in order to meet this. Topicality is just, it refers to the topic at all, and this is something that it's argued. You don't need to worry about it right now. If you're super interested, I think there is a lecture on topicality. And insolvency is just, does your affirmative even solve the things that you claim it solves for? Amanda, you can chime in. I think I butchered significance.
Significance just basically indicates that there's a large change to the status quo. So I think you covered it pretty well. But yeah, you don't have to worry right now. That'll be really relevant if you wanted to start creating a plan right now. Like, that's why we're throwing that out there in case you're like super passionate about this right now and you're like, I gotta get started. Like, we throw that out there for y'all. But if that was too much or you didn't get it all down, first of all, I'm going to throw my email in at the end and I can literally email you the definition of all those words. But second of all, it's okay. We'll get into it later. So you don't need to be feeling too much pressure right now. Just want to clear all that up. It's going to be okay. And you're going to run into that in most debate events as well. So don't let that scare you off the policy. You have to be logical in any debate event.
Okay, and then these are ways that the negative can, like I was saying, poke holes into the affirmative plan. The first thing is called a disadvantage, which is pretty clear. It's just a reason why we shouldn't do the plan. Either it's like something bad happens as a result, or the affirmative unintentionally creates worse impacts than it's trying to solve for. The counterplan is just an alternative way to either solve the affirmative or solve the affirmative better, is generally the argument. Then you have case-specific arguments, which are more related to why the AF is inherently bad, or cannot be passed, etc. Again, for topicality, conceptualize topicality as just it's topical, it follows the resolution. And then 5 is theory and critiques, but they're not relevant at the moment. If you really are interested in this or want to learn more, there is another lecture on this. It's not something we can talk about for 15 minutes and for you to even begin to like understand, or we would butcher it completely. Okay.
You're not going to need it in the beginning anyway. Like, it's just non-essential, but it will be cool later if you get interested in it. But basically what this is saying is that the affirmative is like a baby, and okay, I hate this metaphor that people use. This is one that gets brought up a lot. The affirmative is like a baby, and one stab wound can kill a baby. And so the negative just needs to get one good one in. It's a horrible thing people say. The other metaphor you can use is that the affirmative is like a boat. This is way better. The affirmative is like a boat. One cannon both sinks a boat, right? You don't need to hit every part of the boat. You really only need like one good one in there, and like the boat's kind of screwed. That's the metaphor being used here. So the affirmative has to be really good at dodging, and the negative has to be really good at aiming, is basically what we're saying here. But don't think that it's too hard for the affirmative, because remember, they have a long time to come up with that plan. They have as many months as they want, starting now, before the school year even starts, to start thinking of those plans and thinking of everything the negative could say. And that's why policy debate becomes very interesting very quickly, because people have to start getting creative and weird.
Indeed. I think theory and critiques will actually end up being the most interesting thing for y'all, just because of how relevant it can be. But at the basic level, it's not worth conceptualizing. Okay, flowing is just—
There's other stuff you have to learn first.
Exactly. Okay, flowing is just essentially how you take notes in the round. It's kind of just jargon. Basically, you have an organized way of viewing how arguments interact with each other. If you don't have good flows, you're not going to understand the debate, which is why we always need to take good notes.
We will probably have flowing drills later.
Yes.
Not in this lecture, though.
Yeah. Okay.
The whole system. Are you good?
Yeah, I don't know what comes next. Yes, evaluating the debate. Okay, so I'm just gonna pose a question. Y'all can chime in. How do you think a debate should be evaluated? Like, before you even think about it, before you read it, how do you evaluate debate? Whether it was like a round table in your English class that had no purpose, or when you're fighting with a friend.
Can I propose something?
For sure.
At first, say things about the speaker's performance. Like, I look for things such as stuttering, loss of words, nervous, facial expression, signs that may show that he or she is not a very confident speaker. That's the first thing I look for. Second thing is also the facts. So just like what people do and what the relevant sources are and what exactly are the facts. And that's just all I have to say for now.
Cool. Does anyone else want to chime in?
Go for it.
I can try.
Go ahead.
So first, what I usually do, because I haven't done a whole bunch of debates, I've done a lot of argument essays and stuff, which I really enjoy. I usually look at my facts and stuff, and what I like to do is I like challenging myself by doing the side that I'm actually against. But sometimes I will pick the side that I'm actually passionate about. And then I look at all the facts, and I try and base my arguments based on what is, and then I look at what the other side might try to pose, and then after that, I find solutions for the answers for my rebuttal.
Awesome. That's actually super great, because you definitely do have to do that with your affirmative or whatever you're working on the negative. Oh, good. So when we evaluate a debate, it's a little bit different than evaluating like a speech event. Generally, there are two ways. You get speaker points, which is essentially the speaking evaluation, and then you get the ballot, or the reason for decision, which is basically the decision of who wins. So when we evaluate who wins, we look at the arguments that are extended into those final rebuttals, how they were developed, how they interact with each other, which ones outweigh, which basically means which one has like a bigger impact or has a greater influence in the round.
There's something in the chat. Oh, I see. Yeah, that's a good point in the chat. So an example of what Lily is saying with impact is if you say my plan helps 500 people, and the other team proves that your plan also kills 1,000 people, they can say, well, the death of 1,000 people outweighs helping 500 people, right? So that's an example of very simple impact calculus, but it can get as complicated as global pandemic is better than global warming, right? And you have to get into that debate. Or you can do like structural violence is better or worse than like nuclear warfare. Like these are debates that end up happening in policy, and you have to have those in front of the judge. And it's not about the judge's personal opinion, it's about how well the debaters do it. So if one debate team says the sky is red and I have all these reasons, and the other team does not answer, the judge has to say the sky is red. So it's not about truth. It's usually.
Yes.
There's a couple instances where that's accepted. Like if somebody says something really fucked up, but screwed up. So, for the most part, like if somebody says like the other team is like, I don't know, you just can't be like cussing out your opponents. But other than that, the judge really has to decide based on what you as the debaters have decided matters. So that's why policy is cool. It's not really based on your speaking style, right? Because we've decided in this event that there are things that are more important, like your ideas and whatever. I'm not saying that speaking style can't be important. I'm just saying that in policy, we've mostly decided that your ideas and the things that you believe can be very important.
Right.
And
And
watch your profanity. Sorry. Okay.
Generally, you decide the facts in the round. So essentially, whatever has been proven in the round is seen as true, whereas I might believe that like the idea that the economy is a good thing and we should be a free market is bad. I don't actually believe that. There's no basis of this. But in the round, one of the teams has proven that that is a good thing through showing statistics or through empirics, which is just things that have happened in the past. And then as a result, if I was judging the round, would have to believe what was happening in the round and take my personal opinions out. And that's what I really love about policy debate, is that rarely do you get a judge who's like, I disagreed with you, so I voted for the other team, or you weren't wearing a suit, so I'm voting you down. And these are the types of things that you get to kind of avoid in policy debate, because it just like progressed so much more because it's like the oldest debate event. Okay, I think
it happens. Move on. Yeah, it happens way less than other events. There you go. Oh, that's the end pretty much. So these are a couple of lectures. You can go ahead and talk about them, Lily, if you want. There's more than this. I just didn't get time to put them all up.
For sure, no problem. So if you actually, these aren't all of them, but if you actually look at your schedule, there's a lot of things that have the same title as something that we mentioned in this in this presentation. So if you are like, policy is my thing, I vibe, this is my jam, I want to do this, which y'all should, just go in, look at things that have been mentioned in this like presentation. Again, we'll have the captains post on the Google Classroom so you can refer back to it, and then go attend those lectures. So Amanda and I are giving a lot of these, whether you have one on like counter plans and disadvantages, which we mentioned, and I'm doing a couple on like flowing theory, etc. So if y'all are like, I want to know more, you didn't give me enough, go ahead and go check out those lectures. They'll be more informative.
Yeah, especially if you're like, whoa, that was a lot. I'm feeling really overwhelmed. It's all good. We have a bunch of these going on that we're going to keep having. And also, this is just kind of like a you have to do it kind of thing. Like, just jump in. You're like a little overwhelmed right now. You're like, this is kind of awful. Y'all said a lot of words. I don't know like what is going on. Just jump in. It's okay. We'll be there. I'm going to put out my email in the chat right now. And for those of you who are watching this as a recording and may not have access to the chat, my name is my email with the number 8. So if you can see my full name, it's AMANDANIEMELA, then the number 8 at Gmail. But I'm sending that out in the chat. Y'all can feel free to email me about any questions that you may have, no matter how random. It can be even so far as like, I don't know, just completely random stuff like how many minutes do I have to do this in the debate or whatever, or as complicated as what's a critique. Like, I can answer these questions. I'm sure Lily can answer them as well. You'll be seeing us throughout this camp. But yeah, or if you just have questions about if policy is the right event for you, it is, but you know, you might not be convinced yet.
I will say when Amanda and her partner first explained policy debate to me and my partner, who no longer does debate, but that's besides the point, he enjoyed it. We just got lost halfway through. Schedules did not work out. But when Amanda and Jack first explained policy debate to me, I was like overwhelmed. And then they were like, now you two debate. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, trust me, everyone who starts learning policy debate or any form of speech and debate feels the same exact way, because there are so many technicalities, there's so many specific words, and don't feel overwhelmed. It's going to make sense. If you try it, you'll understand. It just, you gotta do
fun.
by learning.
Yeah.
Also,
and if you're not overwhelmed, good job.
So this presentation is going to be shared, and then the National Speech and Debate Association releases a synopsis on this every year's topic, and I've kind of copy and pasted that into document, as well as some like jargon that you might want to refer to as you're either reviewing this presentation or doing more research and you're like, I don't know what that word means. That's going to be shared to you in a Google Doc as well, so you'll be able to look at that as well, especially if you're really interested into this topic, which I think is pretty relevant. Everyone was mad when it was
very
chosen.
relevant.
Yeah, everyone was mad when it was chosen, and then it's become more and more relevant. So
yeah, because it got chosen in like late last year, and everybody got butthurt about it, which was like ridiculous because it's relevant at any point. But then it got really relevant, and then suddenly everybody quieted down.
All right.
But yeah, so that's basically policy. Yeah, anything to throw in or ask about?
So you said
how are y'all doing?
The debates, since you repeat the same topic, they could really branch out. So like, would you say like your evidence could also be like qualitative, or like you could like bring in like philosophy or stuff like that?
Yes, that is what a critique is. That's a great question. Good for you. That's what people start thinking of as they go on. They're like, wait, why are we debating about the economy? How about we debate why this is a problem in the first place? So that's an example, like you bring philosophy into it. Or when your opponent says like, the death of 501 people outweighs the death of 500 people. You're like, why is utilitarianism good? Let's talk about that. Like, these are examples of critical theory and philosophy being brought into policy debate. And it's something that if you choose to talk about, you'll have to contend with. If you don't want to be involved in it at all, that's also okay. And you can pick judges at tournaments that don't want you to talk about philosophy, and you'll end up with opponents who don't want to talk about philosophy either. You do get to kind of somewhat pick which judges you prefer. We'll get into that later at some tournaments. But yeah, if that's something that you're interested in, this is probably the best event to be doing it in. Other people will tell you it's LD. Other people will be lying, because policy has a much longer speech time, which means that you have a longer time to develop those complex ideas instead of summarizing them and kind of boiling them down to their essentials. LD started as a branch off of the philosophy part of policy debate. So if you're interested in those kinds of things, yeah, qualitative information instead of necessarily just quantitative, and philosophical rather than just empirical, great evidence for policy debate and great question.
Yeah. Also, if you are interested in that, we have the kids who are juniors right now who will be leading policy at Davis High this year. Just recently, they're doing the research right now, which happens over the summer. And if you are interested, they'll be able to like give you hella information and just educate you and provide you with evidence, etc., and also explain all of these more philosophy things, because they're also trained with an emphasis in that, just like all the other policy debaters before us were. So, and before us, I mean Amanda and her partner, but that's besides the point.
Yeah, we were kind of ground zero. I used that type of debating the last 2 years because I didn't really get any training on it in my first year, because I was kind of self-taught that first year, which was kind of an L. But after that, I did basically only that kind of critical debating, and it gets you far. And I recommend it because you're also kind of blowing people's minds when you do it, which is cool. And you're educating yourself, you're educating other people. I recommend it, and I'm trained in it. So if you want to talk about that kind of stuff, I went to a 7-week camp just for that. And we can have a conversation. I see some raised hands. What's up? Or a raised hand. Yeah, go for it.
Did you misspell critics? Like,
Great question.
I
It's
didn't
critique.
understand if it was a C or a K. Because
Yeah, that's a good point. The reason we use a K sometimes is because of the German spelling of critique, because there's a lot of German authors and a lot of German scholars have used this word in the past. You can spell it with a K and do K-R-I-T-I-K, critique, or you can spell it the way we have here. When we refer to something in debate as a K, like the letter K, we are referring to a critique because it's a weird word that starts weird. But yeah, that's a good question to ask. And when we're talking about all this philosophical stuff coming up in debate, usually we're talking about a critique, no matter how you want to spell it, or a K. We're talking about that kind of argumentative structure, which you don't need to worry about now if you're not super interested in it, or if you're like, what are you even talking about, Amanda? This is weird. We can evaluate those things later. But yeah, just know that if somebody refers to a K or a critique, no matter how it's spelled, they're probably referring to this. That's a great question.
I have a question. Do you get the topic and perform it at the end of like the year, like the end of a school year, or do you get the topic and perform it at the end of like the actual?
Oh, I think I understand. Oh yeah, it's a school year thing. Good question. Yeah. So
Okay.
this topic we got at the end of last school year. You get it like a couple months before the school year ends, I think, because there are so many summer camps for debate that they want those summer camps to have access to the topic to begin preparing. After that point, you will have the topic until the school year starts, and it will go for the entire school year. When the new topic gets announced at the end of the school year, you will still be using the old topic. So last year's topic was arms sales. Yes, I should know. I judged on the topic. Last year's topic was arms sales, and it goes to the entire school year, but we heard about this topic by like the end of the school year.
Yeah.
By the way, if any of y'all want to leave, feel welcome, because I think I'm probably going over your time if you have somewhere to be.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Lily.
I was just going to say, if you are one of those people who really vibed or have at the end of this camp have really vibed with policy debate, just like really liked it, thought it was like something you were interested in, closer to the end of summer and the beginning of the school year, I think between August and September, all the summer camps will actually release their documents, and you can actually go in and look for those and read about it and see how people are already setting like a precedent, or how they've already
like they'll release all their evidence. Yeah, like all the work they did, all the cases they made, all the plans they wrote, they'll release online.
Yeah, and you can go in and read those and see like, oh, like, is this something I'm interested in? Or if you thought of an idea that could fall under this year's topic and you wanted to see like how other people were looking at it, you can also go there too. It should be on this thing called Open Evidence. You have to go to the policy debate one.
Maybe send that out in the chat.
Yeah. And
while you're doing that, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm just looking for the link.
No, it's okay. I was just gonna, since we probably have limited time, field a couple more questions because I see some hands being raised.
Go for it.
Yeah, what's that blue shirt? I don't have your names up.
So at like high level debating, like high varsity in college, is spreading like necessary to actually like win or not?
No. For those of you who don't know what spreading is, it's speed reading. But varsity policy does a lot of speed reading or spreading. I was very quick, but you don't need to be. There's a team called North Star that primarily debates on Black politics and Black critical literature, and they do a fantastic job in debate. They like go to the Tournament of Champions, which is the highest competition of the whole year, whole 9 yards, and they don't spread at all. They show up in the room and they're like, hey, we don't want you to spread either, and we don't want to spread because it's hard to understand. And you're like, okay, fair enough. And then they win hella rounds that way. It's not essential at all. And if that's how you decide that you want to debate, that's your prerogative. And you can even ask the other team to please not spread. I mean, it is limiting in debate that other people spread, right? It can be exclusionary for people who might have hearing problems or people who might have speaking issues. So yeah, that's totally fair. So if you don't want to spread, or even if you do, both options will be available to you even at the highest levels of debate. And we can work on making that